You have been pulling weeds every single weekend this summer, down on your knees, yanking the same patch that was clear 2 weeks ago, spending money on weed killer that works for about 10 days before those same weeds come right back. And every spring, you walk into that garden center hoping this is the year it finally gets easier. You spend $60, $80, sometimes over $100 on mulch, on chemicals, on plants that the staff swears will spread and fill in, and yet, by August, you are standing in the same mess. Let me tell you something that took me about 15 years of frustration to fully understand. The reason most American homeowners lose the war on weeds has nothing to do with how hard they work or how much they spend. It has everything to do with what is covering their soil. Bare soil is an open invitation. Every time rain hits exposed earth, weed seeds that have been sitting dormant in your soil, some of them for years, get exactly the light, moisture, and temperature signal they need to germinate. You can spray all you want. You can lay down thick layers of wood chip mulch every spring. But if you do not have a living, permanent plant canopy closing off that soil from above, you are fighting a battle you simply cannot win with chemistry alone. What I am going to show you today are 9 ground covers. Change the entire equation. These are low-growing perennials that spread horizontally to form dense mats or carpets, effectively stealing the light, the moisture, and the space that weed seeds need to establish. Once they are rooted in and fully knit together, the soil underneath them becomes dark, cool, and blocked, and that is exactly the environment where weeds cannot compete. And here is the part nobody at your local garden center ever mentioned. Most of the best ground cover plants on this list actually perform better when you leave them alone. They are not fragile. They are not needful. They do not want your fertilizer or your fussing. Neglect is not a mistake with these plants. For most of them, neglect is the correct growing technique, and I want to tell you right now. Stay with me until we get to number 7, because that one plant does something to dry shade that I have never seen any synthetic product come close to replicating. Before we dive in, drop your US state or your USDA hardiness zone right down in the comments below. I read every single one of them, and it helps me make sure the advice in this video applies directly to where you are gardening. Number 1. Creeping Phlox. Phlox subulata. Let me start with one of the most underrated plants in American horticulture. And I say that after 25 years of working with every kind of landscape you can imagine. Creeping phlox, the botanical name is Phlox subulata, is a native North American perennial. That matters. It evolved here. It is adapted to our soils, our winters, our unpredictable spring frosts, and our summer droughts. You do not have to baby a plant that has been growing on this continent for thousands of years without any human help. Here is what it does in your yard. It forms a dense, moss-like carpet that hugs the ground so tightly that weed seeds literally cannot find purchase beneath it. The stems root where they touch soil, so every season it spreads a little further on its own, without any effort from you. In spring, and I am talking about a spring display that will stop your neighbors in their tracks, this plant erupts with a blanket of flowers so thick you can barely see the foliage beneath. We are talking pink, purple, white, and a vivid violet blue that looks almost artificial. It is so saturated. The cultivars I want you to look for specifically are Candy Stripe, which has white petals with a pink center stripe and is one of the most striking plants I have ever put in a landscape. Emerald Blue for that cool violet color that photographs beautifully, and Scarlet Flame if you want a deep rose red that lights up a slope. These are not obscure. Your better garden centers stock them. If yours does not, they are easy to source online. Now, here is the care instruction that will seem backwards. Once creeping phlox is in the ground and established through its first season, you want lean soil and very little water. This plant comes from rocky outcroppings, slopes, and the kind of well-drained, almost gravelly ground where nothing else thrives. If you put it in rich, amended soil and keep it moist, you will actually get a leggy, open plant that does a poor job of covering the ground. Poor, fast-draining soil and dry conditions produce the tightest, densest, most weed-smothering carpet you have ever seen. Stop fertilizing it. Stop watering it after the first season. That is not laziness. That is the right technique. Creeping phlox is reliably hardy from USDA zones 3 through 9, which means it works in almost every state in the continental US. It blooms April through May, and after bloom, all you do is give it a light trim with your head shears, one pass, maybe 10 minutes across a large patch, and it tightens right back up. After that, you do not touch it again until the following spring. Number 2. Creeping thyme, Thymus serpillum. Nobody told you that one of the most powerful weed suppressors you can put in your yard is also an herb you already use in your kitchen. Creeping thyme, Thymus serpillum, is a sun-loving, fragrant ground cover that knits its spreading stems together so tightly that it physically locks weed seeds out of the soil. I want you to picture this. The stems grow laterally, root as they go, and weave together into a mat that is almost felt-like in density. There is no gap for a dandelion seed to slip through. There is no exposed patch of soil for crabgrass to find a foothold. And this plant handles light foot traffic. Do you have a path between your raised beds? Do you have stepping stones with ugly bare patches between them? Creeping thyme goes there. It survives being stepped on. It actually releases that wonderful herbal fragrance when you brush it or walk lightly across it. And that fragrance, we will talk more about this later in the video, has real biological properties that discourage certain pests. The named varieties you want are elfin, which stays extremely low and compact at under an inch tall and is absolutely perfect between pavers, magic carpet, which has a beautiful mix of lavender pink flowers and is slightly more vigorous, and pink chintz, which produces a soft salmon pink bloom and has slightly woollier, more silver-green foliage. All three are hardy from zones 4 through 9. They want full sun and soil that drains quickly. That is it. No special soil. No fertilizer, no winter protection in any zone within their range. Here is where I am going to correct a mistake I see constantly. Gardeners put creeping thyme in and then feel guilty that they are not doing anything for it. So they add a little granular fertilizer in spring, thinking they are being helpful. Stop. Fertilizer pushes fast, soft, open growth that invites fungal problems and produces exactly the open, gappy mat that lets weeds through. Creeping thyme is native to the lean, thin-soiled hillsides of Europe. It has been proving for centuries that it does not need anything you are about to give it. The most successful creeping thyme plantings I have ever seen are the ones where the gardener planted it and walked away. That is the lesson. Number 3, Ajuga, bugleweed, Ajuga reptans. Now, I want to address a problem that comes up in my comments more than almost any other. What do you do with the shaded, damp, low-lying parts of your yard where the grass will not grow but the weeds absolutely will? Most of the time, people spread mulch there year after year, and the weeds come right through it. Some people try to grow shade-tolerant grass varieties and fail repeatedly. The real answer is Ajuga. And I promise you, once you see it in bloom, you will wonder why you ever fought that problem any other way. Ajuga reptans, commonly called bugleweed, is an aggressive, fast-spreading ground cover that absolutely seals off the soil in shady and damp conditions. I use the word aggressive intentionally and without apology. That is exactly what you need in a problem area. This plant spreads through runners' horizontal stolons that shoot out from the mother plant, root themselves, and produce new rosettes of foliage. In one single growing season, a flat of Ajuga starts planted 12 inches apart will knit together into a continuous mat. By year 2, that mat is thick enough that you will pull virtually zero weeds from it. The foliage is genuinely striking. The variety Burgundy Glow has tricolor leaves in cream, green, and deep burgundy pink that brighten up a dark corner the way no mulch ever could. Black Scallop has such deep purple-black scallop-edged foliage that it looks almost unreal against lighter-colored plants. Catlin's Giant produces larger leaves and stands a bit taller it is. The one to use when you need aggressive coverage and do not care as much about a low profile. And in late April and May, all of these varieties send up vivid blue-violet flower spikes that attract hummingbirds and early-season bees when there is very little else blooming in a shaded garden. Ajuga is hardy from zones 3 through 9. It prefers part shade to full shade, tolerates occasional damp soil, and genuinely thrives in the places your other plants cannot handle. The one maintenance task, and it is optional, is dividing it every 3 years or so if it starts to crowd out things you did not want it to reach. But in a dedicated ground cover area, you plant it, it does the job, and you are done. I want to pause right here for just a second. Think about the last 3 springs. Think about how much you spent at the garden center. The mulch, the weed fabric that the weeds grew through anyway. The bag of pre-emergent that maybe worked in April and did nothing by June. If you are honest with yourself, that number is probably in the hundreds of dollars. Maybe significantly more. Now, here's what I want you to do. Look at the top of your screen and hit that subscribe button. It is free. This channel publishes content specifically for gardeners like you experienced American homeowners who are tired of being sold temporary solutions to permanent problems. Every video on this channel is built around giving you information that actually works and saves you real money. So go ahead and hit subscribe right now, and let's keep going, because we are not even halfway through this list yet, and the next few plants are the ones that have genuinely changed how my viewers think about low-maintenance gardening. Number 4. Sedum. Stonecrop. Let me tell you something that the gardening industry has a financial interest in keeping you confused about. The best plant for a hot, dry, south-facing slope, the kind that kills every other plant you put there, is not expensive, is not hard to find, and does not need a single drop of supplemental water once it is established. It is sedum, also called stonecrop, and it is one of the most forgiving, self-sufficient ground covers that exists anywhere on Earth. Low-growing sedum varieties store water in their thick, fleshy leaves. They are succulents, meaning they are biologically engineered for drought. While your neighbors are dragging hoses to their struggling plantings in August, your sedum is sitting there in the full heat, looking perfectly content, spreading a little further, and slowly choking out any weed that tries to establish in its territory. These plants love poor soil. They thrive in gravelly, sandy, fast-draining ground that would starve a conventional plant to death. That lean, dry, nutrient-poor condition is not something you need to fix before planting sedum. It is the condition these plants perform best in. The named varieties I want you to seek out are Dragon's Blood Sedum spurium, which forms a dense, ruby-red mat that turns increasingly deep in color with the heat of summer and produces small, starry, pink-red flowers that attract butterflies and beneficial insects. John Creech is a low spreader with small pink blooms. For something taller that still functions as a ground cover and produces substantial late summer flower heads, look at Autumn Joy. The botanical name is now Hylotelephium telephium, which stands about 18 inches tall and transitions through pink, rose, copper, and russet from August through winter without any deadheading needed. All of these are reliably hardy across zones 3 through 9. Do not fertilize sedum. Do not amend your soil with rich compost before planting. Do not water it once it is past its first season. These are not negligence, these are the correct instructions. Rich soil produces floppy, overgrown sedum that flops open and actually allows weed infiltration. Lean, dry, poor soil produces the tight, compact, rock-solid mat that is completely impenetrable to weeds. I want you to hear that again. Poor conditions are not something to fix. For this plant, they are something to preserve. Number 5. Hardy Geranium Rozanne, geranium hybrid. I am going to talk about a plant now that I consider one of the greatest ground cover discoveries of the last 30 years. And I say that with 25 years of practical landscaping experience behind me. Hardy geranium, specifically the variety Rozanne, is not to be confused with the annual pelargonium. Geraniums you see in pots on every porch in America. This is a completely different plant with completely different behavior, and it is one of the longest blooming, most weed-suppressing, most self-sufficient perennials that I have ever put in the ground. Here is what Rozanne does. It forms a billowing, mounding clump of deeply cut, lush green foliage that acts like a natural umbrella over the soil beneath it. The leaf canopy is dense enough that it shades the ground completely. No light penetrates to the soil surface, which means weed seeds underneath it get none of the light signal they need to germinate. It is essentially functioning as living mulch with a biological shade mechanism built in. And this is what makes Rozanne something special. From late May all the way through October or November, depending on your zone, it produces a continuous, relentless display of large violet-blue flowers with white centers. Not a spring flush and then nothing. Continuous, 5-month-plus bloom without any deadheading. It is hardy from zones 4 through 9. It tolerates a wider range of soil types than most plants on this list. It can handle average, moderately fertile soil with decent drainage. It is reasonably drought-tolerant once established, though it performs at its peak with occasional deep watering during dry summer stretches. The maintenance routine is almost laughably simple. Cut the whole clump back hard in late winter before new growth emerges. You are talking about a 5-minute job with a Poskley, pair of pruning shears, and then walk away. By May, it is back and blooming again. Plant Rozanne 12 to 18 inches apart in drifts. In 2 growing seasons, those drifts will close together into a continuous, weed-suppressing mass that provides interest from May until frost without a single intervention from you. I want to pause and ask you something honest. Where are you getting your gardening information right now? Because I know the answer for most people watching this video. They are getting it from the label on a plant at the garden center, from a staff member who may or may not have any practical growing experience, or from a website run by a company that is trying to sell them something. And I am not saying the staff at your local nursery are bad people. Most of them love plants. But that store profits when your plants struggle and die. It profits when you buy weed killer every season. It profits when you replace the things that failed last year. Nobody at your local garden center ever sat you down and explained the difference between a plant that genuinely suppresses weeds and a plant that just looks nice in a pot. Nobody explained that some of the best ground covers in the world actually want poor soil and almost zero water, which means you will spend less and do less and get better results. That is the information on this channel, and it is here every single week for free. So if you are finding this genuinely useful, and I think you are, hit that subscribe button. And keep watching, because we are coming up on a segment I added specifically for people dealing with problem areas in their garden, and I think it is going to change how you approach those spots forever. Number 6. Sweet woodruff, Galium odoratum. Now, I want to talk about a plant specifically for those of you who have a shaded garden underneath a large oak or maple, along the north side of your house, in the woodland-style areas of your yard where the combination of shade and tree root competition has turned the ground into a compacted, inhospitable desert for most plants. This is where sweet woodruff Galium odoratum becomes one of the most valuable tools you have available. Sweet woodruff is a low-growing woodland perennial that forms a dense, carpet-like mat of whorled, star-shaped leaves. The foliage is a clean, bright green that actually seems to glow in shaded areas, brightening the space visually in a way that mulch simply cannot replicate. In spring, it produces delicate, tiny white flowers in clusters just above the foliage level, simple, understated, and charming. But the real story here is what happens below the surface and at the soil level. This plant forms such a thick mat that it functions as a genuine living mulch. It regulates the soil temperature underneath it, keeping it cooler in summer, warmer in the shoulder seasons, and it suppresses weed seeds by denying them light and physical space simultaneously. And the foliage itself has a quality that I find remarkable. When dried or bruised, it releases a clean, hay-like, sweet fragrance that has been documented as having genuine insect deterrent properties. This is not folk wisdom. This is a plant that produces coumarin compounds, and insects find those compounds disorienting. You are getting weed suppression, pollinator-friendly spring blooms, and a natural insect deterrent in one plant. Sweet woodruff is hardy from zones 4 through 8. It grows 4 to 8 inches tall and spreads steadily, but politely, this is not an aggressive plant. It self-seeds moderately and spreads by rhizome, but it does not become invasive in the way some woodland spreaders do. Plant it 6 to 9 inches apart in moist, humus-rich, well-drained shade. Once established, it requires almost nothing. It will spread and thicken on its own schedule. Water it during establishment in its first season, and after that, The canopy of the trees above it will provide enough natural moisture in most situations. Number 7. Spotted dead nettle, Lamium maculatum. Here is the plant I told you about at the beginning of this video. If you have been patient, you are about to hear about something that solves what I call the worst gardening problem in America, the dry shade problem. Dry shade, the kind you get under shallow-rooted trees like Norway maples, in the narrow strip between your house and your fence, in the spots where the roof overhang keeps rain off, is a condition where almost nothing will thrive. Hostas struggle, ferns dry out, grass never had a chance. And weeds? In dry, because those are the thugs of the plant world that can survive where more well-behaved plants cannot. Enter spotted dead nettle Lamium maculatum. This plant was born for dry shade. It has sprawling stems that grow across the soil surface and root into the ground as they go, creating a weed-choking, low-growing mat that spreads steadily and seals off exactly the kind of difficult terrain I just described. But what makes this plant remarkable is the foliage. The leaves have a dramatic silver marking along the center, a wide, bright, metallic stripe or splash that reflects what little light is available in a shaded area and visually illuminates dark corners. Put Lamium under a dark canopy, and the silver foliage functions almost like a light source. It is genuinely one of the most beautiful effects in shade gardening. The specific name varieties I recommend are White Nancy, which has silver foliage with green margins and produces clean white flowers. It is one of the brightest plants in shade that I know of. Beacon Silver has almost entirely silver leaves and lavender pink flowers. Purple Dragon produces vivid purple flowers with contrasting silver and green leaves and is one of the most vigorous spreaders in the group. All three bloom from spring through summer, May through August, in many zones, which gives you an extended season of color in areas that typically look dead and neglected. Lamium maculatum is hardy from zones 3 through 8. It prefers shade but tolerates partial sun with adequate moisture. Plant it 12 inches apart, and by the end of its second season, you will have continuous coverage. Here is the care instruction that matters most. Do not fertilize this plant, and do not work hard to improve the soil before planting. Lamium actually performs its best weed suppression function in average to poor soil in dry shade. That is not a coping mechanism. That is its natural environment, and that is where it is perfectly, completely at home. If you made it this far into this video, I want you to understand something about yourself. You are not a casual scroller. You are not someone who watches 30 seconds of a video and moves on. You are someone who genuinely wants to get this right. You are serious about your garden, about your yard, about not wasting another season doing the same thing that has not been working. And I want to be direct. If you are in your 50s or 60s and you have spent too many springs on your knees replacing plants that died, pulling weeds from the same beds, buying the same bags of mulch and weed killer, this video exists for you specifically. Not for the hobbyist who just wants pretty pictures. For you. Go ahead and subscribe if you have not yet. We put out a new video every single week, and every single one of them is built around the same goal: giving you information that makes your gardening life easier, less expensive, and more rewarding. Now, let us keep going, because the last two plants on this list and the technique section right before the final one are some of the most practical information I have put in a single video in a long time. Number 8. Creeping mazus, Mazus reptans. Let me talk about a plant that the vast majority of American gardeners have never heard of, and that solves a problem almost all of them have. You have got stepping stones, right? Or a flagstone path? And between those stones or around them there is a gap, and that gap is either bare soil that grows weeds, or it is filled with some kind of patching material that never quite looks right. Grass planted there gets compacted and dies. Gravel shifts, more mulch, more weeds. You have been managing that problem for years and getting nowhere with it. Creeping mazus, Mazus reptans, is a tiny, mighty perennial that stays under 2 inches tall and forms a lush green carpet that literally handles foot traffic between stepping stones. It is one of the few genuine ground covers that is both ornamental and tough enough for light walking. The plant spreads by surface runners, rooting as it goes, filling in every gap and crack between stones, and blocking weed seeds from finding any exposed soil to germinate in. By its second growing season, you will have a seamless green carpet between your stepping stones that looks professionally installed and requires essentially no maintenance. And then in late spring, usually May into June, creeping mazus erupts with purplish-blue, snapdragon-like flowers that are speckled with white and yellow at the throat. They are small flowers, but there are so many of them that the whole mat seems to pulse with color. People stop and look at a flagstone path planted with mazus in bloom the way they would stop to look at a professional landscape installation. It is genuinely that striking. Mazus reptans is hardy from zones 5 through 8, so it is best suited for the middle and southern portions of the country. If you are in zones 3 or 4, look for creeping thyme instead. For the between paver roll, it is equally effective. Mazus prefers moist, well-drained soil and part sun to partial shade. It does particularly well in spots that stay a bit damper than average. Plant it 6 to 9 inches apart between your pavers or stepping stones and water it consistently through its first season. After that, it largely takes care of itself. Divide any clumps that get too thick every 3 or 4 years. Those divisions are free plants you can put in other gaps, and that is the full extent of your maintenance commitment. Before I get to the final plant on this list, I want to give you something that most YouTube gardening videos skip entirely. The plants I have described today are powerful weed suppressors, but only if you establish them correctly. And the single biggest mistake I see, the mistake that costs people, a full season of progress, is not having a plan for density and spacing before they dig the first hole. Let me walk you through exactly how to do this right. The first thing you need to calculate is how many plants you actually need for the area you are covering. For fast-spreading varieties, Ajuga, creeping thyme, lamium, plant them 6 to 12 inches apart in a staggered or zigzag pattern, not a grid. A grid creates rows with predictable gaps in the diagonal, and weeds will find those gaps immediately. A staggered pattern eliminates those predictable open lines and produces coverage that is 20 to 30% faster than a straight grid at the same spacing. For moderate spreaders like hardy, geranium, Rozanne, or pachysandra, use 12 to 18-inch spacing in the same staggered arrangement. Before you put a single plant in the ground, deal with your existing weeds the right way. Do not just till the bed. Tilling chops up the roots of perennial weeds like thistle and bindweed and multiplies them. Every small root fragment becomes a new plant. Instead, remove perennial weeds entirely by hand or with a hoary knife, getting the full root system out. Then loosen the soil surface you do not need to dig deep, just the top 3 to 4 inches, and add a modest amount of compost if your soil is very compacted or heavy clay. If you are planting drought-tolerant varieties like Sedum, creeping thyme, or creeping Phlox, skip the compost amendment entirely. Those plants perform better in lean conditions. Now, here is a step that most gardeners either skip or do incorrectly. After planting, apply a 1 to 2 inch layer of organic mulch wood chips or finely shredded barkwork. Well around, but not over your new plants. This mulch layer accomplishes 3 things simultaneously. It conserves soil moisture during the critical establishment period. It suppresses the weed seeds that are already sitting in your soil, waiting for a chance to germinate. And it keeps the soil surface from crusting over, which helps your ground cover roots spread more easily. Do not apply more than 2 inches. A thicker layer than that can actually trap too much moisture and encourage crown rot, especially in drought-tolerant varieties. For the first 4 to 6 weeks after planting, regardless of which variety you have chosen, water consistently. Not deeply every day, but 1 to 2 times per week with a thorough soaking that wets the soil 6 inches down. This is the establishment window, and the investment of attention during this period is what determines whether your ground cover knits together in 1 season or 2. After that first growing season, drought-tolerant varieties, Sedum, creeping Phlox, creeping thyme, lamb's ear, come off supplemental irrigation almost entirely. Moisture-loving varieties like sweet woodruff, mazus, and Ajuga will appreciate occasional deep watering during dry spells, but will not need the kind of attention they required in year 1. One more technique that I have seen make an enormous difference in faster coverage: in the gaps between your newly planted ground covers. Lay a single sheet of plain cardboard directly on the soil. No inks, no tape, just plain brown cardboard. Cover it lightly with your mulch layer. The cardboard decomposes in 1 to 2 seasons, but during that time it completely blocks light from reaching the weed seeds below it, while still allowing water to percolate through to your plant roots. This is a technique professional landscapers have used for decades. It is free if you save your moving boxes or grocery delivery cartons, and it will cut your first season weeding work by 60 to 70%. That is the difference between spending your weekends enjoying your yard and spending them on your knees in it. Number 9. Lamb's Ear Stachys, Byzantina. I saved this one for last because I want it to be the image that stays with you when this video ends. Lamb's Ear Stachys byzantina is a plant with a name that perfectly describes its character. The leaves are large, thick, and covered in a dense layer of silvery white hairs so soft and velvety that they genuinely feel like the ear of a lamb when you touch them. And that texture, as beautiful as it is not just ornamental, it is functional. It is one of the most physically effective weed suppression mechanisms in any plant I have ever worked with. Here is what is happening biologically when those thick, densely hairy leaves lie flat across the soil surface. They create a heavy, insulating blanket that blocks light from reaching the soil beneath them completely. Weed seeds require a light signal, even a brief flash of light, to trigger germination. Under a dense lamb's ear mat, that signal never arrives. The soil underneath stays cool, stays dark, and stays inhospitable to weeds all season long. And in a dry summer, when bare soil would heat up to temperatures that stress surrounding plants and accelerate moisture evaporation, that same blanket of foliage keeps the soil surface significantly cooler and more moist. You are getting weed suppression and moisture conservation from the same hairy leaf, and you did nothing to install it except put the plant in the ground one time. Lamb's ear is highly drought tolerant. It is a sun lover. It thrives in the hot, dry, exposed conditions, a south-facing bank, the strip between the sidewalk and the street, the area around your mailbox that bakes in full summer sun that are among the hardest spots in any American yard to maintain. Plant it in those locations, and it will slowly spread into a continuous silver-gray carpet that asks you for absolutely nothing in return. The named variety I recommend most frequently is Helene von Stein, sometimes sold as big ears, which produces much larger leaves than the standard species leaves that can be, 4 to 5 inches long and rarely flowers. If you are growing lamb's ear as a pure ground cover and weed suppressor, big ears is the one you want, because the flower stalks on the standard species can become ragged and untidy as they age. Silver carpet is another excellent non-flowering variety that stays lower and tidier. Both are reliable performers and widely available. Stachys byzantina is hardy from zones 4 through 8. Plant lamb's ear in full sun with well-draining soil. It does not tolerate wet feet or heavy clay soil without amendment. It does not want fertilizer. It does not want rich, amended beds. It does not want to be watered after its first season. Those conditions produce lush, floppy growth that is more susceptible to crown rot and less dense as a weed suppressor. Poor, fast-draining soil and summer drought produce the tight, silvery carpet that is the full expression of what this plant is capable of. Stop watering it. Stop feeding it. Stop worrying about it. You will be rewarded in direct proportion to how much you leave it alone. Let me step back for one moment and give you the full picture of how to use what you have learned today. Because this is not about planting one of these 9 and hoping for the best. The gardeners who get the most dramatic results, the ones who transform their yard in 2 to 3 seasons and never fight weeds in those areas again, are the ones who match the plant to the condition. If you have a sunny dry slope, creeping phlox, sedum dragon's blood, creeping thyme, or lamb's ear, any one of those, all of them together in a mixed planting for maximum visual interest and layered coverage. If you have dry shade under trees, spotted dead nettle is your first call. Ajuga can handle that situation as well if it is not too dry. If you have wet shade or woodland conditions, sweet woodruff and Ajuga together create one of the most effective and beautiful woodland floor plantings I know. If you have gaps between stepping stones or pavers, creeping mazus for the warmer zones, creeping thyme everywhere else. And if you want year-round interest and extraordinary long bloom in a mixed border or large open bed, hardy geranium Rozanne as your workhorse, with lamb's ear or creeping phlox as edging companions. The common thread through all 9 of these plants is the same principle. One investment, correctly made, in the right spot, in the right plant, and then you step back. You do less, you spend less, and your garden becomes more beautiful and more manageable every single year that passes. I want to close today by saying something directly to you. If you are in your 50s, your 60s, or beyond, and I suspect that describes a significant portion, of the people watching this right now, you have spent enough summers on your knees. You have replaced enough dead plants, hauled enough bags of mulch, sprayed enough weed killer in the July heat. You have earned something better. You have earned the right to sit in your own backyard, in your own yard, without a spray bottle in your hand and a weed problem on your weekend schedule. You have earned a garden that does the work while you enjoy the result. Every plant I showed you today is a step toward that. None of them require chemicals. None of them require special soil amendments or weekly maintenance schedules or expertise you do not already have. What they require is a one-time decision to plant the right thing in the right place, to leave it alone, and to trust that the plant knows what it is doing. Because it does. It has been doing it for thousands of years without any help from anyone. If you are not subscribed to this channel, I genuinely want to ask you why. This information is here every single week. It is free. It is built specifically for real American homeowners with real yards and real schedules who want real results without the sales pitch. Hit that subscribe button right now so you do not miss what is coming. In the next few weeks, we are going deep on container gardening, on native plant ground covers specifically for the Southeast, and on the exact division and propagation techniques that let you turn one flat of any of these plants into full landscape coverage without spending $1 more. And before you go, I need 2 things from you in the comments. First, drop your US state or your USDA hardiness zone down below. I build this content around where this community is actually gardening, and every single zone mentioned in the comments shapes what I cover next. Second, tell me which plant on this list you are putting in the ground first, not which one you are thinking about, which one you are actually doing. Because that is the difference between watching a video and making a real change in your yard. Now go get those ground covers in the ground. Your yard and your weekends are waiting.